Hello everyone, Tunile here. Thanks for returning to the Africa History channel. We got a great response from our first video on the Gbanamu War. Some of the feedback was from my Ibadan people who graciously corrected some of my name pronunciations. I've made those changes in this concluding episode of the Gbanamu War of 1833. So, thanks a lot for the comments and keep them coming. Let's get on with the episode. In the dry season of 1833, the army of the expelled former leader of Ibadan, Maye Okunade, clashed with the Ibadan-Oyo army in the part of Ibadan known as Idishu, where the Ishu deity was worshipped in the town at the time. In modern times, this is the now popular Orita Challenge New Motor Park in the city of Ibadan. Maye had gained the upper hand over the Ibadan-Oyo in these first set of engagements. There were two reasons for this. First, the Ibadan were not as well supplied with ammunition as their rivals, and they were beginning to run out. Second, and perhaps more importantly, the large number of Muslim fighters on the Ibadan side were unwilling to fight because it was a Friday, a day they held sacred. Seeing imminent defeat because of this religious sentiment, Kurumi of Ijaye, a pragmatic man who had been invited to come to the aid of the Ibadan Oyo, as a fellow Oyo man, got up and gave an impassioned speech, which he ended by saying, "My fellow Oyo warriors, it is true that Fridays are inauspicious for fighting. I understand. But it is only for aggressors and not for those of us who are defending our homes and our fireplaces." Fired up by Kurumi's charge, the Oyo allies rose up and began to rush the Ife allies, startling them. Now, the guns that were in use in those days were muzzle loaders, which took some time to load. So the Oyo Ibadan would wait for the Ife allied soldiers to shoot their shots and then rush upon them before they could reload properly, grabbing the barrel of their guns in the process. By doing so, they would divert the shot away from themselves and then finish off the enemy quickly with their swords, spears, axes, and machetes. To the observer, it appeared that the Oyo Ibadan soldiers were holding the fire in their hands. This is how the battle came to be known as the Gbanamu War, the Grasping Fire War. Before the Owu refugees from the Owu War that ended in 1822 finally moved to Abeokuta, the bulk of them first moved to an Owu-allied town called Erumu. There, the ruler of Owu, the Olowu, usurped the more junior ruler of Erumu, set up his court and ruled, biding his time to avenge the destruction of his own town. When Maye was expelled from Ibadan suddenly in 1832, he first went to stay with another Ife chief, Oluwole, in the nearby town of Idomakba. There, his Ife allies began to muster to him. While he was at Idomakba, the Oyo contingent of Ibadan sent ambassadors to Maye to entreat with him to return as their leader, but he was determined to deal with them once and for all, as the number of Oyo refugees in the area had grown exponentially because of the inflow from the north after the Fulani of Ilorin and their Yoruba allies destroyed Oyoile, Konla, Gmogun, and Akese between 1831 and 1833. These were some of the largest Yoruba towns in Yoruba land, and this great influx of Oyo refugees alarmed the southern polities. Most of these refugees went to either Ijaye or Ibadan, swelling the populations of these towns greatly. Seeing the opportunity, and because it was him siding with an Owu man over an Oyo man that triggered his expulsion from Ibadan, the Olowu invited Maye to Erumu and allied with him. Others had an axe to grind with the Oyo Ibadan, chief of which were the Egba that had been displaced from the towns that were now occupied by mainly Oyo people. In the classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, the Egba, who were now in their fortified city of Abeokuta, were not concerned that Maye had been the leader of the band of marauders when they destroyed the towns of the Egba forest and had only been ousted from Ibadan after leading the town for nearly 5 years. Two Egba chiefs, Gbadegesin and Ogini, led a large contingent of Egba warriors to join the Ife and Owu, who now mustered at Idomakba, since Maye planned to attack Ibadan from the south. Ife towns such as Ikire, Akpomu, and Ikpetumodu supplied more men to Maye's alliance, creating an overwhelming force that threatened to overrun the Ibadan. This force began to choke off the food supply to Ibadan systematically, attacking caravans of corn and other supplies that would normally come through Ikire to Ibadan. They also kidnapped people from Ibadan farms, discouraging much of the farming. Because most of these Ibadan farms were slave plantations, the slaves, upon sensing weakness in their masters, began to desert the farms to join the Maye alliance. This went on for almost 1 year, and it explains why the ammunition and food supply in Ibadan was so low when the fighting finally commenced in 1833. The Ibadan called to their Oyo brethren for support after being defeated in the first set of engagements in this war. Reinforcements began to arrive from the Oyo refugees settled in towns like Ede and Iwo, but they were not sufficient to turn the tide of the battle until the arrival of Kurumi of Ijaye and his nearly 10,000 strong force. Inspired by his speech and replenished by his battle-hardened reinforcements, the Oyo of Ibadan and their allies re-engaged Maye and his alliance with unexpected ferocity and with a new game plan to counter their guns. It was such an unexpected approach to fighting that the gamble won. They completely routed the Ife, Egba, and Owo alliance, putting many to death and capturing many of the leaders as prisoners. Of the leaders of the alliance, only the Olowu was not captured in this battle. He had remained in Erumu, as it was rare for Yoruba kings with beaded crowns to fight at the war front themselves. Fighting was usually delegated to war chiefs. The victorious Ibadan would eventually take vengeance on Erumu and destroy the town, killing the Olowu in the subsequent Erumu battle. They would go on to sack all the towns that supplied fighters to Maye, including Akpomu, Ikire, and Ikpetumodu. Their rampage would only be stopped when the Egba of Abeokuta defeated them in the Arakonga War in 1834. 523 of these captives from the Gbanamu War were sold to Ijebu slave traders, who then moved them to the coast and sold them on to Lagos merchants. They were then sold in Lagos into the transatlantic slave trade, boarding a Cuba-bound Spanish-Uruguayan slave ship, the Manuelita, captained by Don Jose de Cano Garay, on October 30, 1833. Such was the relationship between the many wars in the interior in this period and the supply of humans into the unfortunate trade. The Manuelita was intercepted and captured near the Isle of Pines in Cuba after a 7-hour pursuit by British anti-slavery naval ship, the HMS Nimble, under Lieutenant Charles Bolton. By the time of their liberation, only 477 of the original 523 that boarded the Manuelita remained, indicating 46 of the slaves had died during the voyage. However, the Oyo Ibadan did not sell the leading men, Maye and the Egba chiefs, Gbadegesin and Ogini, into slavery. The tradition was to ransom such high-ranking chiefs, as it was believed that any chief that personally executed another chief who had fought valiantly in battle would inevitably meet the same fate themselves. Knowing they would have to follow this tradition if they gave audience to these chiefs, the Oyo Ibadan chiefs refused to see them, even as they continued to demand such an audience loudly. They were eventually executed by common soldiers. Kurumi of Ijaye made his name in this war and took the glory for the demise of these chiefs. His eulogies from the time included, he killed Maye, he killed Ogini, and he killed Gbadegesin, and he plunges his spear into the chests of Ife fighters. Ironically, he would meet a similar fate in some decades in the Ijaye War, which we shall discuss in future. Thank you very much for listening to this Gbanamu War short series. If you enjoyed this short series on the Gbanamu War, you don't want to miss our next series. Over the course of 6 episodes, I'll be bringing the history of the 1851 bombardment of Lagos to you like you have never seen. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Africa History channel. Thank you very much.